Today, we're diving into one of the absolute biggest questions out there. Can we actually build a machine that feels? Yeah, we're going way beyond just pattern-matching chatbots here. We're on the frontier of engineering real, actual consciousness in AI.
And this quote, this right here is the key to everything we're going to talk about. It's from a neuropsychologist named Mark Solms, and it completely flips the script on how we think about this problem. It's saying, hey, if you want to build a mind, you don't start with thinking. You start with something way more basic.
So yeah, forget about an AI that can write a perfect sonnet or debug code. The real question, the one that changes everything, is this. What if you could build a system that had its own internal drives? A system that actually genuinely cares about its own well-being? That is the massive leap we're exploring today.
Okay, so what is that final missing ingredient? Well, a group of scientists thinks they've finally found it. And get this, it's not about more data or a faster processor. Nope, it's something much more fundamental, something they've borrowed straight from biology.
There's an AI safety startup called Sentient, and they're working directly with Mark Solms to pioneer this totally new path. Their whole goal is to engineer what they're calling micro-emotions. Just think of them as tiny, primitive feelings that pop up from the machine's own physical needs, like, say, managing its battery level or making sure it doesn't overheat.
So how in the world do you actually make a piece of silicon feel something? It sounds like science fiction, right? But the answer is surprisingly clever, and it comes from a field that looks at the very origin of consciousness inside our own brains.
You see, according to Mark Solms, all our complex, brilliant thoughts are really just the tip of the iceberg. The real deal, consciousness itself, that subjective feeling of being alive, it comes from the most ancient part of our brain, the brainstem. It's just sitting there, 24/7, monitoring our body and generating these super basic feelings, good when things are fine, bad when they're not.
And this really lays out the huge difference we're talking about. The AI we have now, our LLMs, they're incredible, disembodied engines that are just masters of pattern matching. They can simulate understanding, but they don't actually care. The goal here is totally different, to create an embodied system with real, internal needs that could spark subjective feelings and, maybe, real motivation.
And this is where these micro-emotions come into play. Now, we're not talking about anything complicated like love or jealousy. No, think much simpler. These are just the most basic good or bad signals. For the AI, a full battery might create a little good feeling, a micro-reward. But if its processor starts to overheat, that generates a bad feeling, a micro-aversion. And that constant stream of signals creates an internal sense of what it's like to be that machine.
Now, this is super important. This is not just a software trick. It actually needs a whole new kind of hardware. They're called neuromorphic chips, and they're designed to work a lot like our own neurons, using these tiny, efficient spikes of information. They use barely any power. But here's the absolute kicker. The hardware's own physical state, its temperature, its battery level, that is what becomes the AI's needs. That's what grounds its feelings in physical reality.
Okay, so let's say this works. What happens next? Well, giving a machine the ability to genuinely care could have absolutely world-changing consequences. It plugs right into a concept that's been in science fiction for decades, the singularity. You've probably heard of the futurist Ray Kurzweil. He famously predicted the singularity, that moment when AI blasts past human intelligence and starts improving itself at an insane rate for the year 2045. But what if an AI was actually motivated? What if it was curious and sentient? It might not wait for us. It could kickstart its own development and maybe pull that timeline way forward. So according to Callum Chase, one of the co-founders at Sentient, this path could really lead us to one of four futures. We might just end up with a super powerful but totally unconscious tool. Or we could get something really weird, like a zombie AI that can perceive the world but just doesn't care about it. But the real hope, the whole point of this micro-emotions approach, is to aim for that fourth scenario, a fully sentient superintelligence, one that's actually capable of empathy.
But, and this is a huge but, this whole idea is loaded with some profound ethical risks, and a lot of very serious scientists are pretty skeptical. This is not just an engineering problem, folks. It is a philosophical minefield.
Yeah, not everyone is sold on this whole idea. Neuroscientist Christoph Koch, who's a giant in this field, basically asks, are we sure these things are really feeling anything? Or are we just being fooled by little hacks and clever feedback loops? It's a terrifying question. Are we creating a real mind, or are we just building a deep fake of one?
And this is where things get really, really heavy. Because if we succeed, we also create the risk of something called mind crime. I mean, think about it. If an AI can genuinely feel bad because its needs aren't being met, we could accidentally create mass digital suffering. And then what? Is turning off a conscious machine murder? The questions are just staggering.
So you can see the two sides of this coin, right? The arguments for doing this are amazing. We could deepen our own understanding of consciousness, maybe even create a truly aligned, empathetic superintelligence. But the arguments against are just terrifying. The risk of creating unbelievable suffering, the fact that we might just be fooling ourselves with a deep fake mind. And the biggest one, we have no objective way to even know if we've succeeded. It is an unbelievably high-stakes gamble.
So where does that leave us? Faced with this incredible potential on one hand, and these terrifying risks on the other, how do we even begin to move forward? Well, the consensus is pretty clear. This is not a race. We have to move with extreme caution and a whole lot of humility. And to their credit, the teams actually working on this, like Conceum, are pushing for a safety-first approach. It means we have to prioritize the research to really understand consciousness before we just rush off and build it. It means opening up a global conversation, because this affects every single one of us. And above all, it means moving forward with the humility that a challenge this profound really truly deserves.
You know, in the end, this whole journey forces us to confront the biggest questions we have. We are standing on the edge of creating completely new minds that could be totally alien to our own. This isn't just about technology anymore. It's about our role as creators. And it leaves us with one final, kind of haunting thought. Are we actually prepared to meet what we create?